In 2009, a teenager was officially declared dead. His body was buried, his family mourned. But in 2018, the same name appeared again. On a second death certificate. One person, two official deaths. And no one could explain why. This case was supposed to be closed, but it never really was. Chapter 1: The Registry Entry. In the Municipal Archive of North Creek, case file number 4417 was stored between tax reports from 2008 and fire inspection records from the old hospital. The cardboard cover had faded, its edges worn, it wasn't handled often, but it was never fully forgotten. On it were a teenager's name, date of birth, and date of death, April 14, 2009. Cause of death: heart failure. Doctor's signature. Hospital seal. A standard form, a typical font, no notes in the margins. Cases like this were called clean in the archive. They required no explanations and led to no follow-ups. But in 2018, a new stamp appeared on the same cover. Read, re-identification. Below it, another date of death, written in a different hand. The archivist who opened the file after that said nothing for a long time. Later, he would say it was the second date that didn't belong there. We don't usually, he said, have documents that outlive the people they describe. Chapter 2: The boy everyone knew. He was 15. For behavior. He attended an ordinary public school, sat in the middle rows, stood out neither for grades nor. Teachers remembered him as quiet. Classmates called him normal. He played basketball after school, skipped class occasionally, not often enough for his mother to be called in. He lived alone with her in a house on the outskirts of town. His father existed in documents, but rarely in real life. He had no enemies. He had no close friends. People like that usually leave very little behind. That was why his death felt strange. It was too sudden and at the same time too simple. That day he collapsed at school. He was taken to the hospital. A few hours later, the family was told his heart had failed. The doctors spoke confidently. They said it happens. No one insisted on an autopsy. In that town, people trusted words spoken in white coats. Chapter 3: A funeral without questions. The funeral took place a few days later. The family insisted on a closed ceremony. The casket was never opened. For many, this came as a relief. Not everyone wants to see a teenager who died suddenly one last time. The priest spoke briefly, without pauses, as if trying not to linger on the story longer than necessary. People stood silently, unsure whether tears were appropriate. A few classmates came with flowers, then left quickly. No one stopped them. A week later, a memorial plaque appeared at the school. During the morning assembly, they spoke about how fragile life is and how no one was to blame. A month later, his name was added to the city's registry of the deceased. The death was fully processed. Documents signed. Questions closed. And that was why no one looked at the case again. Until it returned on its own. Chapter 4: The Forest 40 kilometers away. In October 2018, two hunters entered a forested area rarely visited even by locals. It was nearly 40 kilometers from North Creek, too far for a walk, too inconvenient for an accidental route. They were looking for deer. Instead, they found bones scattered among fallen leaves. At first, they thought it was an animal. Only when they noticed scraps of clothing did they call the police. At the scene, investigators found fragments of a jacket, mismatched sneakers, and a silicone school wristband. A name was written on it. Police initially assumed coincidence. The name wasn't uncommon. Those wristbands had been sold in the school store for years. Still, protocol required sending bone samples for testing. It was considered a formality, one performed without expecting anything specific. Chapter 5: 100%. The results arrived 2 weeks later. The lab report stated, a complete genetic match. 100%. No margin of error, no doubt. At first, investigators assumed a technical mistake. They ordered a second test. Then a third at a different lab. The results didn't change. The reports dryly stated, "Identity confirmed." The name matched that of the teenager buried in 2009. The comparison was made using biological samples stored by the hospital after his death. One detective reviewed funeral home records. Another checked medical files. Everywhere the same sequence appeared: death, body, release, burial. The question that never appeared in any report was much simpler than the official wording. If this is him, who was buried 9 years ago? Chapter 6: A Different Death. The forensic examination of the second body changed the status of the case. This was no longer a strange coincidence. It was a contradiction. Cause of death: mechanical asphyxiation. Pressure marks on the neck. Microfractures consistent with a struggle. The report stated that death occurred quickly, but not instantly. This had nothing in common with heart failure. Nothing in common with a hospital bed. In a separate line, the examiner added, "The injuries were inflicted shortly before death, around the time the body ended up in the forest." A phrase appeared in an internal memo, crossed out and rewritten several times. Cause of death does not match the original certificate. From that moment on, the case stopped being medical. It became a question of trust. In documents, in memory, and in what is considered final truth. Chapter 7: The Grave That Was Never Opened. When police officially proposed exhumation, the decision divided the town quietly, without arguments. The family refused almost immediately. Their statement spoke of pain that couldn't be lived through twice, of the dead's right to rest. Formally, it all sounded reasonable. Unofficially, people began avoiding the subject. Conversations shifted in stores. The name stopped being mentioned in church. An unspoken rule emerged: don't ask questions if you don't want to seem cruel. The grave remained untouched. The headstone clean. Flowers appeared regularly, but no one ever saw who brought them. Without the family's consent, police couldn't proceed. And the town seemed strangely grateful for the pause. Because once the casket was opened, it would mean admitting that someone had lived with a lie for 9 years. And possibly knew it. Chapter 8: Memories That Don't Fit. After a short newspaper mention, people began to remember. Not publicly, in whispers. These recollections didn't sound like testimony. More like confessions their speakers didn't fully trust. A middle-aged man said he saw the boy at a bus stop in 2011. He even remembered what he was wearing. Then added, "But I knew he was dead." A woman from a nearby street claimed she had seen a silhouette in the window of a house long abandoned. She had never said it out loud before. None of these stories made it into official reports. They were dismissed as collective memory errors. In a town where everyone knows everyone, people often see familiar faces where they exist. But the more such mistakes appeared, the harder it became to ignore their shared trait. All of them took place after the funeral. Chapter 9: 8 Empty Years. Between 2009 and 2018, the records showed silence. Not just missing information. Complete erasure. No medical visits. No school or employment records. No fines. No registrations. No trace in systems where a person usually appears, even by accident. For a teenager, this was impossible. Even those who run away make mistakes. Here, there weren't even mistakes. Investigators called this period the empty corridor. It led nowhere, yet always returned to the same question. If he was alive, who made sure the world didn't notice? The only constant during those 8 years was the grave. And the flowers left there every year on the same exact date. No one dared to ask, what if those flowers weren't memory, but evidence? Chapter 10: What Was Never Spoken at Home. After the second identification, police attempted several times to contact the family. The conversations were short. The mother spoke calmly, almost detached. She repeated the same phrases as if rehearsed. "We already buried him. We don't want to go back to this. For us, nothing has changed." Later, it became clear the family wasn't united in this stance. The older sister was the only one who agreed to an unofficial conversation. She said that after 2009, a forbidden topic appeared in the house. Any question about her brother was shut down. Any attempt to recall details was met with anger. She remembered that on the day of the funeral, her mother didn't cry by the casket. But late at night at home, that's when she said a sentence she never repeated again. "I don't know who we buried today." Chapter 11, The Refusal. When exhumation was raised again, it was the mother who insisted on an absolute refusal. Not because of religion, not because of tradition, because of fear. The sister later said, she wasn't afraid the grave would be empty. She was afraid there would be someone else inside. They had a conversation no one recorded. No shouting, just quiet words, each one final. The sister wanted the truth. The mother wanted to preserve the version she had lived with for 9 years. At one point, the mother said, "If he didn't die back then, it means he left. And if he left, it means he didn't want to be found." After that, the sister stopped insisting. She understood. For her mother, a second death wasn't a tragedy. It was a threat, because it could take away the only thing she had left: certainty that it was already over. The family stopped speaking to police. Chapter 12, What They Knew First. During a renewed review of the case, investigators noticed a detail previously considered insignificant. The family learned about the boy's death earlier than the hospital's official notification, by a little over an hour. The mother explained that a nurse she knew had called her. In a small town, this didn't violate norms, everyone knows someone. But that same nurse later denied making the call. She couldn't recall such a conversation. It wasn't proof, just a discrepancy. But it was from discrepancies like this that stories are built. The ones that resist being solved. Investigators noted. The family didn't behave like people who had just learned of a death. They behaved like people waiting for confirmation. Chapter 13, Belongings from Another Time. During analysis of the items found in the forest, one detail was kept from the public. The jacket found near the remains had been purchased years after 2009. The model didn't exist at the time of the supposed death. When police carefully asked the family, the mother said she didn't remember such a jacket. The sister said she had seen something similar but wasn't sure. Neither asked where it came from. Again, it wasn't proof. But it created the sense that some questions were simply not allowed to be spoken aloud. If the boy died in 2009, how did he have a piece of clothing from another time? And if he lived, why did no one ever look for him? Chapter 14, The Grave as an Argument. The grave slowly stopped being a place of memory. It became an argument. Every time police returned to the topic of exhumation, the family answered the same way. Everything has already been done. The phrase sounded less like a request, and more like a conclusion, as if opening the grave would destroy not only a version of death, but the entire order of life built around it. Among themselves, investigators speculated. Perhaps the family wasn't afraid of an empty casket. Perhaps they were afraid it would contain the right body. Because then the second body in the forest would become a question they would have to answer. Chapter 15, What Remains Unanswered. The case was closed. Officially due to lack of new evidence. Unofficially due to lack of consent. The records now contain 2 dates of death, and a family that insists only one of them exists. If the boy survived in 2009, someone knew first. If he disappeared, someone didn't look. And if the truth lies in a grave that was never opened, then silence became its best protection. In North Creek, flowers are still brought, and no one asks who they're really for.